He was one of the most powerful men in Seoul, a billionaire who never bowed to anyone. But in the middle of a five-star hotel lobby, surrounded by his elite peers, he dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead to the marble floor, in front of his housekeeper. This is why. 30 minutes earlier, his 5-year-old daughter was almost taken in a crowded department store. 260,000 children are abducted every year. She was seconds from becoming one of them. The man was Kim Jun-ho, a retail empire heir known as the Stone for his impenetrable demeanor. The woman was Amara Oak, a Nigerian migrant working her first month in Seoul. Their worlds were never meant to touch. So what happened in those 30 seconds at the Lot department store that shattered every rule of power, class, and society between them? To understand the kneeling, you have to see the moment just before it, when a little girl in a pink dress was pulled toward an emergency exit, and a stranger's hand reached out. Amara Oak arrived in Seoul with $47, a 2-year work visa, and a warning from her mother. In a new country, you are invisible twice, once as a foreigner, once as help. Do your job and come home. The agency placed her in the Gangnam penthouse of the Kim family. Her title was residential assistant. Her reality was this: a 9x12 room at the end of the service corridor, a uniform of beige polyester, and the care of a 5-year-old girl named Soo-min for 10 hours a day. The girl was quiet, with eyes that watched everything. Her mother had died in a car accident 2 years prior. Her father, Kim Jun-ho, was the heir to a department store empire and a man who communicated in spreadsheets and silence. Amara saw him in the hallway sometimes, a silhouette in a $5,000 suit, already on a call to Hong Kong or New York. He would nod, a single downward tilt of the chin that wasn't an acknowledgement, it was a dismissal. She was part of the furniture. A necessary appliance. A month into the job, Amara had learned 3 things. 1. Soo-min loved strawberry milk and hated the color green. 2. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Choi, believed foreigners were lazy until proven otherwise, which meant proving it every single day. And 3. Kim Jun-ho was not just rich. He was powerful in the way that changes the air pressure in a room. He was 38 years old and controlled 70% of Korea's luxury retail market. The press called him the Stone, not for his last name, which meant gold, but for his demeanor. He was polished, immovable, cold. He had built his fortune on a simple, brutal philosophy. Emotion was a design flaw in business. He had fired a senior VP for crying at his daughter's funeral. He had won a billion-dollar merger by outweighting his rival's cancer diagnosis. He was a man who believed leverage was the only true language, and he never, ever kneeled. Meanwhile, Amara's world was measured in different units. The exchange rate of the naira to the won, the cost of an international phone call to Lagos, the weight of a child on her hip as she carried Soo-min to bed because the girl was afraid of the dark hallway. Amara had not come to Seoul for a story. She had come because her brother's university tuition was due, and nursing jobs in Nigeria paid 1/10 of what a domestic worker could earn abroad. She sent 80% of her salary home every month. She walked Soo-min to the private preschool each morning, then spent her afternoons cleaning, organizing, and waiting. Her life was small, quiet, and designed to be unnoticed. But then Tuesdays. Tuesdays were Soo-min's ballet lesson in the Cheongdam district, and the lesson was held in a studio above the flagship store of Kim Jun-ho's own empire, the Lot department store in Myeongdong. It was the crown jewel of his portfolio. 9 floors of marble, crystal, and imported luxury. Every Tuesday at 3:15, Amara would take Soo-min by the hand, lead her through the employee entrance, up a service elevator, and into the mirrored studio. For 1 hour, Amara would sit on a bench in the hallway, watching through the glass as little girls in pink leotards learned to plie. And for 1 hour, she was not a housekeeper. She was just a woman sitting in a quiet hallway, listening to piano music. It was during one of these Tuesdays that she first saw the man. He wasn't staff. He wasn't a parent. He was a man in a new leather jacket leaning against a pillar near the fire exit, watching the children, not watching the class, watching the children. Amara felt it before she understood it, a primal click in the base of her skull. Her grandmother had called it the seamy spirit. The sense that something was wrong with a picture. The man saw her looking. He smiled, a flat, empty smile, and walked away. Amara said nothing. Who would she tell? What would she say? A man stood in a public building. So the following Tuesday she watched. He was there again. Same jacket, same posture. This time his eyes were fixed on Soo-min. Amara moved. She walked into the studio, apologized to the teacher, and sat on the floor right beside the bar, directly in the man's sightline. She stared back at him through the glass until he looked away. After class, she held Soo-min's hand so tightly the little girl complained. She reported it finally to Mrs. Choi. The head housekeeper sighed. "You are imagining drama. This is Seoul, not Lagos. We do not have kidnappers in department stores. You are scaring the child with your stories." The criticism was clear. The foreign help was causing problems. So Amara stayed silent. She began a new routine. Before every ballet lesson, she would walk the perimeter of the floor. She noted the locations of security cameras, 3, all pointed at the jewelry kiosk, none covering the fire exit near the studio. She memorized the security guard's schedule. His break was at 3:45, right when class let out. She counted the steps from the studio door to the elevator bank, 27, to the fire exit, 12. She didn't know why she was doing this. It felt like a superstition, a pointless ritual, but her hands had started to tremble every Tuesday. And then the weather changed. It was a Thursday, not a Tuesday. Soo-min had a dentist appointment in the building's medical suite. Jun-ho had an unexpected afternoon free. He decided for the first time in months to accompany them. This was unprecedented. The great Kim Jun-ho walking through his own store with his daughter and the housekeeper. He didn't speak to Amara. He walked 3 paces ahead, a king inspecting his kingdom. Soo-min, thrilled, skipped beside him. Amara followed, carrying the child's small backpack. They were on the 5th floor in the toy section when Jun-ho's phone rang. An emergency board call. He held up a finger, turned away, and began speaking in low, rapid Korean. Soo-min drifted toward a display of giant stuffed bears. Amara stayed close, but her eyes were pulled to a reflection in a glass display case. The man in the leather jacket. He was here, on a Thursday. He was watching Jun-ho. He was studying the distance between the father on the phone and the little girl by the bears. Amara's breath caught. This wasn't about a child. This was about a tycoon's child. This was leverage. She moved toward Soo-min just as the man began to move. But then Jun-ho finished his call. He turned, snapped his fingers once, and Soo-min ran to him. The moment passed. The man melted into the crowd. Amara stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had to say something. This was proof. That evening in the penthouse, she waited until Mrs. Choi left. She approached Jun-ho in his study. He was at his desk, staring at a spreadsheet. "Sir, I need to speak with you about Soo-min's safety." He didn't look up. "Schedule it with Mrs. Choi. It's about a man at the department store. He's been watching her. I saw him again today." Now he looked up. His expression was not concern, it was annoyance. "My stores have security. If there was a threat, they would have identified it. The cameras don't cover the ballet studio hallway. The guard is on break at dismissal." "And how do you know this?" "I observed." "You observed?" He leaned back. "Miss Oak, you are here to care for my daughter's basic needs, not to conduct surveillance. Your visa is contingent on your performance of specified duties. Creating anxiety is not one of them. Do you understand?" It was not a question. It was a verdict. She was dismissed. The message was clear: stay in your lane or lose everything. The following week was quiet, too quiet. Amara's Tuesday ritual became more intense. She now carried a small metal whistle in her uniform pocket, a purchase from a street vendor for 501, a stupid, tiny defense. The day of the incident was unremarkable, sunny, a Tuesday. Soo-min wore the pink dress she loved. Amara felt a knot of dread in her stomach she couldn't explain. The ballet class was normal. The man was not there. Amara almost laughed at herself. She was paranoid. Mrs. Choi was right. She was importing fears. Class ended, 3:45. The security guard, right on time, walked toward the break room. The hallway emptied. Amara helped Soo-min change her shoes. The little girl chattered about a rabbit she wanted to draw. They stepped out of the studio. The hallway was deserted. And then from the service staircase door, the man emerged. Not hesitant, not watching. He moved with purpose. He was between them and the main elevator bank. He smiled directly at Soo-min. Your Appa sent me, he has a surprise downstairs. Sumin, confused, took a small step toward him. Amara's body moved before her mind. She stepped in front of the girl. Sumin, stay behind me. The man's smile didn't waver. No problem, come with me both. He reached out not for the child but for Amara's arm to move her aside. His hand touched her wrist, and in that touch Amara saw the entire future. The fire exit door propped open. A van. A missing child. A lifetime of wondering if she could have done one thing differently. The whistle was in her pocket. She didn't reach for it. Instead, from a place she didn't know she had, a sound erupted from her throat. Not a scream, a roar, a deep guttural shout that echoed off the marble walls. Help, fire exit STAIRS. Now, she wasn't shouting for the absent guard. She was shouting to startle him, to create chaos, to make the picture wrong. The man flinched. His eyes darted. In that second of hesitation, Amara did not run. She turned, swept Sumin into her arms and sprinted, not toward the elevator but directly into the crowded main atrium of the department store. She was running toward the one place she knew Kim Jun-ho might be, his executive office on the 9th floor. But she never made it to the elevator, because standing in the center of the ground floor atrium, surrounded by a group of Japanese investors, was Kim Jun-ho himself. He saw her first. His housekeeper, disheveled, running through his pristine store with his daughter clutched to her chest. His expression hardened into pure, unadulterated fury. He took one step forward, ready to end her career, her visa, her life in Korea with a single sentence. And that is when the security guards, finally alerted, grabbed the man in the leather jacket at the fire exit. And that is when Sumin, trembling, pointed at the man and said, in a clear, small voice, "That man tried to take me." Amara shouted. Kim Jun-ho stopped. The investors stopped. The entire glittering atrium of his empire seemed to hold its breath. He looked from his daughter's terrified face to the struggling stranger being handcuffed to the face of his housekeeper, a woman breathing hard, her uniform wrinkled, her eyes defiant, waiting for him to fire her. He had 10 seconds to decide what was true, and in those 10 seconds the stone began to crack. The silence in the atrium was not quiet. It was the loudest sound Kim Jun-ho had ever heard, the sound of his own worldview shattering. He did not fire Amara. He did not speak. He simply took his daughter from her arms, held her close, and looked at the housekeeper for a full 10 seconds. Then he turned to his head of security, a man who had been standing uselessly by the jewelry kiosk, and said one word, "My office. Now." The next hour was a blur of harsh light and sharp questions. The police arrived. The man in the leather jacket, whose name was Park Min-sik, sat in a holding room. He had no prior record. He was a freelance debt collector. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding. He thought the child was lost. But his phone told a different story. It contained 17 photographs of Sumin taken over 3 weeks, time-stamped. It contained a screenshot of Kim Jun-ho's daily schedule, marked confidential. And it contained a single unanswered text message sent that morning to a number registered to a shell company in the British Virgin Islands. The message read, "Asset in position, confirm extraction fee." This was not a random crime. This was a transaction. In his office on the 9th floor, Jun-ho listened to the police captain's report. His face was stone, but his hands, resting on his $6,000 desk, were trembling. The captain explained the security gaps Amara had identified. The missing camera angles, the guard's break schedule, each fact was a needle. The head of security, a former Special Forces lieutenant, was fired on the spot. Jun-ho then did something he had never done. He asked, "Where is Miss Oak?" She was in the staff cafeteria giving her statement to a junior officer. He went to her. The room fell silent. He stood before her, and the entire power dynamic of the penthouse hung in the air between them. He said, "You were right. I was wrong." For a man who had never apologized in his professional life, the words were like speaking a foreign language. Amara nodded once. She said, "She is safe. That is what matters." But that was not the end. It was the beginning of the real storm, because Kim Jun-ho was not just a father. He was a public company, and news of an attempted kidnapping at the flagship lot store was not something that could be contained. By 7 p.m., the financial news channels were running speculative tickers. Security breach ATKIM Group crown jewel. By 9, the social media gossip boards were on fire. Rumors flew. A rival conglomerate was behind it. It was a disgruntled former employee. It was a failed extortion plot. The board of directors demanded an emergency conference call. Junho's advisors presented him with a crisis management plan. It had 3 pillars. 1. Issue a statement downplaying the incident as a minor security incident involving a confused individual. 2. Quietly enhance store security. 3. And this was presented as a non-negotiable, thank the housekeeper privately with a bonus, and then transfer her to a different property to avoid continued media scrutiny and narrative complications. The word complications hung in the air. It meant her race. It meant her immigration status. It meant the uncomfortable picture of a black domestic worker as the hero in a Korean dynasty story. Junho listened. He looked at the plan. It was clean, efficient, and morally bankrupt. It was the old him. The stone would have signed it without a second thought. But the man who had seen the terror in his daughter's eyes, who had heard the guttural shout of a woman he treated as furniture, could not. He said, "No." The room went still. "We will issue a statement tomorrow. It will thank Miss Oak by name. It will detail the security failures. And it will announce a full external audit of all our security protocols." His head of PR, a woman who had spun 3 corporate scandals into shareholder value, looked horrified. "Sir, that is a confession of liability. Our stock will plummet." "Let it," Junho said. That night he did not sleep. He sat in Sumin's room watching her sleep. He replayed the security footage from the hallway, the angle from a camera on the opposite end. He saw it all. The man emerging, Amara stepping in front, the roar, the sprint. He watched it 20 times. Each time he saw something new. The precise moment Amara decided not to run but to charge toward the crowd. The way she held Sumin, one hand cradling the back of the child's head. The absolute absence of fear in her eyes. It wasn't bravery, it was certainty. This was a woman who knew exactly what to do when the world broke. He also reviewed the older footage, the Tuesdays. He saw the man watching. He saw Amara watching back. He saw her walking the perimeter, counting steps. She had seen it coming. And she had tried to tell him. He had silenced her. The weight of that error was a physical pain in his chest. The next morning, the statement was released. It did exactly what Junho said it would. The business news exploded. Kim Group stock dropped 7% in the first hour of trading. The headlines were brutal. KIM Group heir admits negligence. Tycoon's daughter nearly kidnapped due to security failures. But a different headline also appeared in the softer news sections. Migrant housekeeper SAVES KIM heiress. The article named Amara Oak. It mentioned she was from Nigeria. It quoted the police captain calling her actions the single most decisive factor in preventing a tragedy. This was the pivot. The story was no longer just about a crime. It was about class. It was about race. It was about visibility. The comment sections on Korean portals split into 2 distinct worlds. One side praised Amara as a hero. The other asked why a foreign domestic worker was the only one paying attention. Where was the father? This is why we shouldn't outsource childcare. The subtext was clear and ugly. In the penthouse, Amara tried to resume her routine. It was impossible. Mrs. Choi treated her with a new, icy formality. The other staff members glanced at her with a mixture of awe and resentment. She was now a problem, a spotlight. Sumin, however, clung to her. The child had nightmares. She would only sleep if Amara sat in a chair by her bed. Junho noticed. He also noticed the silence of a house where everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop. 4 days after the incident, the shoe dropped, but not from the direction anyone expected. A reporter from a major newspaper, digging into Park Min-sik, the would-be kidnapper, found a money trail. The shell company in the British Virgin Islands was a dead end. But a payment to Park a month earlier was traced back to a Seoul-based private equity firm. That firm had recently lost a vicious takeover battle to Kim Junho. The target had been a chain of premium hotels. Junho had won by a razor-thin margin. The CEO of the losing firm had been publicly humiliated. He had vowed in a drunken rant at a members-only club to make Kim feel true loss. It was a quote overheard by a bartender. The police now had a motive. This wasn't just a kidnapping for ransom. It was a corporate attack, a message. They were going to take what Kim valued most. The investigation escalated to the Financial Crimes Unit. Subpoenas were issued. Jun-ho was now not just a victim but a key witness in a potential conspiracy case. The board was apoplectic. The stock kept falling. The pressure mounted from every direction: shareholders, family, elders, the press. Through it all, there was one fixed point: Amara's calm. She continued to care for Soo-min. She cooked the child's meals. She braided her hair. She did not ask for anything. Not recognition, not money, not even an apology. Her silence was more unnerving to Jun-ho than any demand could have been. It forced him to look at himself. He had built an empire on the principle that everyone had a price. What was the price of the person who saved your child's life? What was the price of the person who did the right thing when you were doing the wrong one? He had no calculus for this. It broke his model. A week after the incident, he called her to his study, not a summons through Mrs. Choi. He went to her room and knocked. She followed him. He offered her a sum of money. It was large enough to buy a house in Lagos. It was a bonus, he said, for her service. Amara looked at the check. She did not touch it. "If I take this," she said, "then what happened becomes a service I was paid for." It was not a service. It was a human being protecting another human being. You cannot put a price on that. If you try, you make it small. Jun-ho was stunned. He had offered the ultimate tool of his world, money, and it had been rejected as an insult. "What do you want then?" he asked, truly lost. "I want to know that Soo-min is safe. I want to know that the man who sent that man is caught. And I want to finish my contract and go home to my family. That is all." Her clarity was a mirror, and in it, he saw the blurry, compromised figure of his own life. He canceled the check. The following day, he made a decision. He would host a small, private gratitude dinner for Amara at the Shilla Hotel. He would invite a few close family friends and business partners. He would thank her publicly within his inner circle. It was, his advisors whispered, a terrible idea. It would make the hero narrative permanent. It would cement the association of the Kim family with a scandal, but he insisted. The invitations went out. The night arrived. Amara was given a new dress, a simple, elegant navy blue. She was driven to the hotel. She was nervous. This was not her world. The event was in a private dining room. About 30 people, the elite of Seoul society, were there. They smiled at her with tight, curious smiles. They spoke of her bravery in the past tense as if it were a singular event now concluded. Jun-ho gave a short speech. He called her courageous. He said the family was in her debt. It was formal, it was proper, it was hollow. At the end of the speech, the guests applauded politely. Then they turned back to their champagne and their conversations about golf and stock options. Amara stood by the window, feeling more invisible than she ever had in her uniform. She had been presented, thanked, and filed away. The message was clear: we have done our duty. Now return to your place. She decided to leave early. She slipped out of the dining room and walked into the grand, echoing lobby to wait for her car. And that is when Kim Jun-ho found her. He had seen her leave. He had felt the crushing emptiness of his own words. He had looked around the room at the polished, indifferent faces of his peers and saw the void his life had become. He followed her into the lobby. He saw her standing alone, a solitary figure in the vast marble space, looking at the rain outside. And in that moment, the last wall crumbled. All the logic, all the leverage, all the cold calculus evaporated. There was only a debt that could not be paid and a gratitude that could not be spoken in a language of contracts. He walked toward her. The few guests milling in the lobby, the hotel staff, they all turned. He stopped in front of her. He did not speak. He simply went down, onto both knees, on the cold, polished marble of the Shilla Hotel lobby. He placed his hands together, bowed his head, and pressed his forehead to the floor in a jial, the deepest, most formal bow of gratitude, of respect, of submission. The ultimate Korean gesture of "I am beneath you." The lobby froze. A champagne glass shattered somewhere, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. Every phone in the room was raised. Amara looked down at the most powerful man she knew, now at her feet. Her hand went to her mouth. And in the utter quiet, Kim Jun-ho, the stone, finally spoke the truth. "You saved my daughter, you saved me, thank you." But the act of kneeling was not the end of the story. It was the detonation. Because in that single, silent bow, he had not just thanked his housekeeper. He had set a match to the carefully constructed powder keg of his reputation, his social standing, and the very rules that governed his world. And the explosion was just beginning. The video was 17 seconds long. It was uploaded to a social media forum at 11:23 p.m. By midnight, it had 2 million views. By sunrise, it had broken the Korean internet. The clip was shaky, vertical, shot from a balcony overlooking the lobby. It showed the entire scene: the powerful man in the navy suit descending to his knees, the bow, the stunned silence, the black woman in the blue dress standing motionless above him. The caption read, "Kim Jun-ho bows to his maid." Has he lost his mind? The reaction was a cultural earthquake. It split into 3 violent tremors. The first tremor was social. The elite circles of Seoul were apoplectic. A group of chaebol heirs, Jun-ho's own peers, released a private statement calling the act an embarrassing emotional display that undermines the dignity of leadership. Family elders from the Kim clan called an emergency meeting. Jun-ho's uncle, a board member, told him, "You bowed to an employee. You have made us a laughingstock. Resign now and we can contain this." The second tremor was public. For every comment calling the gesture beautiful and human, there were 10 that dissected it with racist, classist venom. He's groveling to the help. Is this what feminism has done? She probably planned the whole thing for attention. Amara's name, her photograph, even her hometown in Nigeria were plastered across hate forums. She received 37,000 direct messages in 48 hours. The third tremor was institutional. The board of Kim Group convened an emergency vote of no confidence. The stock, already down 7%, dropped another 12%. The company was now in a tailspin. Jun-ho's lawyers advised him to issue a clarifying statement, to say he was overcome with emotion, that the bow was an outdated tradition, that it did not reflect the company's values. They begged him to walk it back. He refused. He instead called a press conference. He stood before the cameras, alone, no advisors. He said, "I kneeled because I was wrong. I kneeled because gratitude, when it is real, requires humility. I will not apologize for recognizing a hero in my home. And if that costs me my company, then the company was built on the wrong foundation." It was the most un-Korean, uncorporate speech ever given by a tycoon. It was also a declaration of war. The board moved to oust him. The vote was scheduled for 72 hours later. Jun-ho was now fighting for his life's work. But then the fourth tremor hit, and this one came from a direction no one expected. The police, pursuing the money trail from the kidnapper Park Min-sik, hit a wall. The private equity firm's CEO had an alibi. The payment had been authorized by a mid-level manager who had since vanished. It was a dead end. But the forensic accountant on Jun-ho's own legal team kept digging. He found a discrepancy. The shell company that had initially hired Park had made one other payment 2 months earlier. It was a retainer fee to a private security consultancy based in Seoul. That consultancy had done work for Kim Group. Specifically, they had been hired by Jun-ho's own head of security, the man he had fired after the kidnapping attempt. The head of security had been on the payroll of the shell company. He had been feeding internal schedules, security layouts, and movement patterns to the kidnappers. The betrayal was inside the house. Jun-ho was stunned. This was not a corporate rival's attack. This was an inside job. The fired security head was arrested. Under interrogation, he broke. He said he was just a middleman. He said the real architect was someone who wanted Jun-ho humbled, ruined, and removed. Someone who would benefit directly from his downfall. The prosecutor asked, "Who?" The security chief gave a name that turned the entire case upside down. Kim Seung-woo. Jun-ho's cousin, the vice president of Kim Group's international division, the man who would become CEO if Jun-ho was ousted. The plot was not just about kidnapping a child. It was a corporate coup. The kidnapping was designed to create chaos, to make Jun-ho look weak and negligent, to crater the stock and trigger the no-confidence vote. The kneeling video was an unexpected bonus. It made Jun-ho look emotionally unstable, sealing his fate. Seung-woo had never wanted Soo-min harmed. He had given strict orders. The child was to be taken, held safely for 48 hours, and released after the board vote. The trauma was just collateral damage. The police moved quickly. They arrested Kim Seung-woo at his country club. They seized his devices. The evidence was overwhelming, Encrypted messages, financial transfers, the whole blueprint. The board vote was canceled. The stock began a slow, shaky recovery. Jun-ho was vindicated. But the cost was a poison that had seeped into the foundation of his family. His own blood had tried to destroy him. And in the midst of this corporate and familial civil war, Amara was drowning. The public scrutiny was a hurricane. Reporters camped outside the penthouse. Her visa agency, terrified of the controversy, notified her that her sponsorship was under review. A xenophobic lawmaker gave a speech citing her case as an example of the dangers of unregulated foreign labor. Immigration officials opened a file. The message was clear: she was now a problem for the country. She was to be removed. Jun-ho's lawyers fought back. They filed for a special humanitarian visa citing her heroic actions. The application was denied on a technicality. The clock was ticking. Amara packed her single suitcase. She told Jun-ho, "I cannot stay where I am not wanted. I will go home." Jun-ho looked at her, then at his daughter, who was clinging to Amara's leg. He had just survived a coup. He had just reclaimed his company, but he was about to lose the two things that actually mattered. And that's when he realized the final, brutal truth. The system was built to protect people like him and exclude people like her. He could win every battle within that system and still lose the war for his own soul. So he decided to break the system. He called his public relations team. He said, "I am going on live television, on the 8 o'clock news, and I am going to tell the whole story. Every part of it." His team was horrified. "Sir, the scandal is over. You won. The stock is recovering. Why reopen the wound?" His answer was simple. "Because the woman who saved my daughter is being deported for it. That is a deeper wound." The interview was set. It was the highest-rated news program in Korea. The host was known for her tough questions. The stage was set for a corporate leader to give a careful, polished performance of contrition and strength. That is not what happened. Kim Jun-ho sat down, looked directly into the camera, and began to speak. Not as a CEO, as a father, as a flawed man, he narrated the entire story. His initial dismissal of Amara's warnings, his arrogance, the moment in the atrium, the kneeling. He called the racist and classist attacks against Amara what they were: shameful. Then he dropped the bombshell. He announced that Kim Group was establishing a new foundation, funded with $50 million of his personal wealth. The Oak Foundation. Its mission: to provide legal aid, housing, and advocacy for migrant domestic workers in South Korea. He then announced that Amara Oak would be its first director, with a 5-year visa granted under the government's own exceptional talent category. He had not asked the government. He had forced their hand on national television. The host was speechless. The control room was in chaos. The live feed cut to a commercial break, but it was too late. The statement was made. The challenge was issued. The next 24 hours would determine everything. Would the government accept his bold move, or would they dig in and deport Amara anyway, creating an international incident? Would the public see this as redemption or further insanity? And what would Amara, who had never asked for any of this, do? She was watching the interview in her small room. She saw Jun-ho stake his entire reputation, his hard-won peace, on her behalf. She saw him become, for the first time, not a tycoon, but a man. And she knew one thing. The battle was no longer about a kidnapping or a kneeling or a visa. It was about a question: can a single act of true humility change not just a person but the world around them? The answer was coming. And it would arrive in the form of a letter from the Ministry of Justice, a press conference on the steps of the Seoul Immigration Office, and the final, breathtaking image of a little girl in a pink dress, holding the hands of two people from different worlds, refusing to let go. The letter from the Ministry of Justice arrived at 9 a.m. the next morning. It was not delivered to Kim Jun-ho. It was addressed directly to Amara Oak. It requested her presence for a meeting at 11 a.m. at the Seoul Immigration Office. No lawyers, no interpreters, just her. It felt like a summons to a sentencing. Jun-ho offered to send his legal team with her. Amara refused. "If I go with your lawyers, I am still your project. I need to go as myself." She wore the same navy dress from the hotel. She carried her passport and her work visa. She walked into the government building alone. The room they led her to was small, gray, with a single table. Sitting across from her was the Deputy Minister of Justice himself, a stern man in his 60s and a senior immigration official. The Deputy Minister spoke first. "Miss Oak, your situation is unprecedented. Mr. Kim's television performance has created a diplomatic atmosphere. We have a proposal." The proposal was this. They would grant her a 1-year special residency permit, not as a domestic worker, as a cultural contributor. In return, she would decline the director position at the Oak Foundation. She would give no further interviews, and she would leave the Kim household within 30 days. The message was clear: take your visa and disappear quietly. We will contain the story. Amara listened. She had been prepared for a denial, for a deportation order. This was more clever. This was a silencing. She looked at the two powerful men. She thought of her mother's warning about being invisible twice. Then she thought of Soo-min's hand in hers and the sound of Jun-ho's head touching the marble floor. She had spent her life being quiet. It had almost cost a child her life. She took a breath. "No," she said. The Deputy Minister blinked. "I'm sorry. I said no. Thank you for the offer, but I cannot accept those conditions." "Miss Oak, be reasonable. This is a generous solution." "It is not a solution. It is an erasure. You want me to become invisible again so that the discomfort I caused can be forgotten. But what happened to me is not unique. It happens every day to women like me in this country. We are told to be grateful for scraps and to be silent about the rest. If I accept your offer, I betray every one of them." The room was silent. The immigration official shifted uncomfortably. Amara continued, her voice steady. "I will accept the director position at the Oak Foundation. I will use my voice. And I will continue to care for Soo-min Kim with her father's permission for as long as she needs me. If that means my visa is denied, then I will be deported, but I will not be silenced." She stood up. She did not wait for a response. She walked out of the room. She did not know it, but the meeting had been recorded. A junior staffer, moved by her testimony, leaked the audio to a journalist. By 3 p.m., the recording was everywhere. Amara's words, "I will not be invisible again," became a hashtag. Migrant worker advocacy groups rallied. International human rights organizations issued statements. The Korean government, which had been trying to manage a public relations problem, now had a full-blown moral crisis on its hands. That afternoon, something remarkable happened. A coalition of nearly 50 Korean women's groups and civic organizations held a press conference on the steps of City Hall. They demanded the government grant Amara Oak permanent residency and formally recognized the contributions of migrant domestic workers. They called Kim Jun-ho's foundation a first step, but demanded systemic policy change. The tide of public opinion, once so viciously split, began to turn decisively. The narrative was no longer about a tycoon's strange behavior. It was about justice. Pressure mounted. At 5 p.m., the Blue House, the office of the South Korean president, issued a brief statement. It said the matter was being reviewed with the utmost seriousness and compassion. It was a signal. The government was backing down. At 7 p.m., Kim Jun-ho received a call from the deputy minister. The tone was different, respectful. The ministry, he said, had decided to approve Amara Oak's special talent visa for a period of 3 years, renewable. No conditions. The foundation could proceed. Jun-ho thanked him and hung up. He did not celebrate. He walked to Amara's room. He told her the news. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Not of joy, of exhaustion, of the weight of being a symbol. "It is done," she said, but it wasn't, not quite. There was still the matter of Kim Seung-woo, the cousin. His trial was swift. The evidence was irrefutable. He was found guilty of conspiracy, kidnapping, and corporate espionage. The sentence was 15 years. The day before his sentencing, Jun-ho visited him in the detention center. They sat across from plexiglass. Seung-woo, stripped of his suits, looked small. "You came to gloat," Seung-woo said. "No," Jun-ho said. "I came to ask why." Seung-woo laughed, a hollow sound. "Why? Because you had everything, the company, the respect, the golden sun. I was always in your shadow. I built the international division from nothing, and the board still saw me as your assistant. I wanted you to know what it felt like to have everything taken away, to be powerless. You used my daughter. I never wanted her hurt. It was just leverage, business." Jun-ho looked at his cousin, this man who saw human beings as leverage. He saw the old version of himself. The difference between us, Junho said quietly, is that I learned what leverage really is. It's not money or power. It's the debt you owe to someone who shows you who you could be. You tried to break me with a kidnapping. Instead, you broke me open. Thank you. He stood up and walked away, leaving Seungwoo staring baffled at his back. The final act of the public drama was the launch of the Oak Foundation. It was held not in a hotel, but in a community center in the Itaewon district, home to many of Seoul's migrant communities. Amara stood at the podium. She did not speak Korean perfectly, but she spoke clearly. She outlined the foundation's goals: legal aid clinics, Korean language classes, a 24-hour crisis hotline, and a public campaign to change the laws that tied a worker's visa to a single employer, a system rife with abuse. She introduced the board, a mix of activists, lawyers, and surprisingly, Mrs. Choi, the former head housekeeper, who had resigned from the Kim household to join the foundation. Mrs. Choi in her speech said, "I was wrong. I treated rules as more important than people. Miss Oak taught me that sometimes to do right you must first see the person in front of you." The foundation was funded, but it was Amara's vision. Junho stood at the back of the room watching. He was not the center of the story anymore. He was a supporter. It was where he needed to be. Life in the penthouse changed. The silence was gone. Soo-min laughed more. Junho came home for dinner every night. Amara's role evolved. She was still Soo-min's primary caregiver, but she also spent her afternoons at the foundation offices. The dynamic between her and Junho was neither employer-employee nor romantic. It was a partnership forged in fire. They argued about foundation strategy. They debated Korean politics. They sometimes sat in silence, reading in the study, a comfortable quiet between two people who had seen the worst and best of each other. And then, the final surprise. A year after the kidnapping attempt, Junho was cleaning out his father's old study in the family estate. In a locked drawer beneath old stock certificates, he found a sealed envelope. It was addressed to him in his father's handwriting. It was dated the week before his father's death, 10 years earlier. He opened it. The letter read, "Junho, if you are reading this, you have finally become a man. A real man is not measured by what he conquers, but by what he is willing to kneel before. I learned this too late. During the war, a janitor in our factory hid me from soldiers. He was poor. I was the owner's son. He saved my life. And when it was over, I was ashamed. Ashamed of my fear, ashamed of my debt to a man beneath me. I gave him money. I never thanked him. I have carried that shame every day of my life. Do not carry it. Find what is worthy of your knees, and bow." Junho sat on the floor of the dusty study, the letter in his hands, and wept. His father, the original Stone, had lived and died with the same regret Junho had almost inherited. The kneeling was not his madness, it was his inheritance. He showed the letter to Amara. She read it, then looked at him. "You finished his story," she said. That evening, Tuesday, they had jollof rice. Amara had taught Chef Lim the recipe, and now it was on the family menu every week. Soo-min, now 6, helped set the table. They ate together, Junho, Soo-min, and Amara. The empty chair at the head of the table where Junho's father had sat no longer felt empty. It felt like a presence finally at peace. The news cycle moved on. The kneeling video became a case study in business schools and sociology seminars. Kim Group stock not only recovered but reached new heights, oddly boosted by the perception of a CEO with integrity. The world forgot, then remembered in brief flashes. But in the penthouse overlooking the Han River, the changes were permanent. Amara's one suitcase was joined by bookshelves full of legal texts and Nigerian novels. Her 3-year visa was extended to 5, then 10. She never became a Korean citizen. She said she didn't need to. She had found something rarer, a home that was chosen, not given. Kim Junho never kneeled in public again. But every morning before his morning coffee, he would go to his daughter's room. And he would kneel by her bed just to watch her sleep, to remember what almost was lost and what was found. The stone was gone. In his place was a man, still powerful, still formidable, but with a crack in his foundation that let the light in. And that light looked a lot like a little girl's laughter, the smell of Scotch bonnets on a Tuesday, and the quiet, unwavering presence of a woman who had taught a kingdom that the strongest walls are not made of stone, but of the hands that choose to hold each other up. So what is the true weight of a kneel? It is not the weight of a body on marble. It is the weight of a world lifted. For Kim Jun-ho, the kneel was a surrender to a truth he could no longer deny, that his strength was his weakness and his perceived weakness. The act of bowing became his ultimate strength. It recalibrated an empire. For Amara Oak, the kneel was a door she never asked to open, leading to a battlefield she never wanted, but a purpose she was born to claim. She did not seek to be a symbol. She sought to do the right thing for a child, and in doing so she became a compass for a nation struggling with its own reflection. This story is often told as a viral moment, a shocking image, but the image was just the flash of light. The real story is the long, slow burn that followed. The policy changes. The foundation that has now helped over 2,000 migrant workers. The little girl who learned that heroes wear uniforms, not crowns. The system is built to convince us that power is vertical, that some are above and some are below. That gratitude has a ceiling and fear has a floor, but every once in a while a crack appears. A man looks at a woman he was taught to see as beneath him and realizes she is the foundation he's been standing on all along, and he gets down on the ground to meet her. That crack, that split in the marble, is where the light gets in. It is where change begins. It is not a story about a perfect hero. Amara was terrified. It is not a story about a perfect redemption. Jun-ho is still a formidable, complicated man. It is a story about a single, correct instinct. The instinct to put your body between a child and danger. And the instinct, however delayed, to honor that sacrifice not with money but with metamorphosis. We live in a world that sells us cynicism. That tells us power never bends, that systems never change, that the lines between us are permanent. But here is the quiet truth those lines fear. They are drawn in sand. And all it takes is one act of undeniable humanity, one roar in a hallway, one bow in a lobby for a tide to come in and wash them clean. The Oak Foundation still operates. Soo-min is in grade school now. Jun-ho runs his company, but he runs it differently. The stone is a story he tells his daughter at bedtime, a cautionary tale about the man he used to be. The video of the kneel still exists online. Its comments are now a museum of that cultural moment, the vitriol, the praise, the confusion. But if you scroll to the very end, you'll find a recent comment posted just a month ago. It's from a young Korean woman. She wrote, "I am a domestic worker from the Philippines. I saw this video 3 years ago when it happened. It made me cry. Today my employer showed me the new contract based on the new law the foundation helped pass. It has my name on it, not just his. I have my own visa now." I showed him this video and said, "This is why." He nodded. He didn't kneel, but he saw me. That is enough. That is the weight. That is the ripple. That is the true measure of what happened in a hotel lobby, in a department store, in a penthouse where a man learned to kneel and a woman learned to stand. Not just for herself, but for everyone behind her. Look for the cracks in your own world. Listen for the roar in the quiet hallway. And remember that the most powerful walls are not the ones that stand the tallest, but the ones we choose together to dismantle. If you found a crack of light in this story, consider subscribing. We are drawn to these moments not for the shock, but for the hope that if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere, even here.